Now, the prisoner ombudsman is calling for improvements to be made to the healthcare provided at Maghaberry Prison. He has released a report outlining a number of missed opportunities in the case of an inmate who died from an inoperable brain tumour. Ombudsman Tom McGonigal says the report is not about apportioning blame.
My preference is to try and help the prison service, and in this case the South Eastern Trust, do things better. The Trust have accepted the recommendations, and I'm taking it in good faith that they will implement the recommendations that they have accepted. Whenever we subsequently come to look at other death and custody cases, we always review recommendations that were made and accepted, and that will be no different in this case from others.
Well, the prisoner concerned, who is referred to only as Mr H, was represented by Madden and Finucane Solicitors. Joining me in the studio is Katie McAllister from the law firm. Good morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We will respect the family's wishes, of course, not to identify your client, but tell us a little bit about the man and how his operation, the tumour, the disease, progressed within the confines of the prison.
Yes, our client was 34 years of age at the time of his death. He was a recall prisoner. He had been unwell in hospital for quite some time, but he was ultimately admitted to hospital with severe dehydration and malnutrition. And at that time only were the family made aware of his health problems. We were told by fellow prisoners that he was actually unable to get out of bed to get food or water, which ultimately seems to have led to his admission to hospital with dehydration and malnutrition, which would obviously raise a concern.
The Ombudsman recognises that there were 4 opportunities to diagnose his tumour that were missed, but he does point out that your client was not always compliant with the care that was offered.
Well, the family would dispute that. There are some points where it was said that he had refused treatment, but there seems to be a difficulty with how refusals are recorded, in that it may have well have been the case that he was actually unable to get out of bed, as his fellow prisoners had contacted our office to express concerns about.
The Ombudsman, though, said it's possible that his attempts to manipulate the medication which was prescribed did not assist his diagnosis. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, there were ongoing issues of medication which we experienced day and daily with prisoners within Maghaberry, and it is a constant battle with the medics there in respect of that, with prisoners getting access to medication and indeed proper health care.
He said too that treatment was also delayed when your client did not attend a hospital accident and emergency department.
Yeah, that is set out in the report. The family would say that was because he was actually so unwell that he didn't feel able to get out of bed to physically make the trip. There is quite a lot involved in prisoners making a trip to hospital. It isn't as easy as it would be for you and I. So he didn't feel up to the trip ultimately, so that needs to be fairly reflected.
The Ombudsman too says that although earlier diagnosis would not have changed the final outcome, opportunities for an extended life expectancy and a reduction in his distress through earlier palliative care could have been provided. So is it more your concern the end of life treatment or the earlier diagnosis?
Well, that is a concern regarding palliative care treatment, but it is also said in the report that there were 2 further opportunities, so 6 in total, that were missed, going back as far as 2010 and 2013 when he had seizures within the prison, and they weren't investigated at all. And the independent GP, Dr Hall, who was commissioned by the prisoner ombudsman, stated that if they had been properly followed up, that it may well have made a difference. It could reasonably have been expected to change the outcome here.
The Health Trust too issued a statement, and it suggested that no concerns have been raised about your client's health when he was admitted to Maghaberry on the 28th of April, not until the 4th of June. They point out the occasions on which he had to be persuaded to attend hospital. Also, that several prison officer and nurses had showed compassion. Do you agree with those points raised?
Well, I accept the points are made in the report, but I personally would have to raise the issue as to if this man was lying in a prison bed, actually physically unable to get out of bed in order to get himself food or water. That doesn't seem very compassionate to me. So something has gone wrong within the system that should not be allowed to happen today.
The Ombudsman recognises a gap in clinical leadership at Maghaberry Prison. How has that manifested itself in your case, do you think?
Well, there's a lack of oversight. No one seems to take ultimate responsibility for the medical issues, that is made out in the report, and that's subject to one of the recommendations. And that isn't only an issue in this case. We deal with this every day, usually in much less serious cases, thankfully, regarding access to a doctor, timely access to a doctor and access to adequate medication, etc. But in this case, and obviously in some other cases, it does lead to terribly serious outcomes.
The Ombudsman says the report is not about apportioning blame, and procedures have been put in place to remedy what has gone wrong to date. Do you think measures will improve now at the prison, or do you think that you're going to take further legal action in this particular case?
Well, the family are considering all options at present, including the possibility of issuing proceedings for the negligent treatment of their son. But from our point of view, in dealing with prisoners in general, these are only recommendations, so we can't enforce them as such, which would be an issue of concern to us. But we have to hope that the prison will act in good faith and implement these changes. To date, we have seen similar recommendations in the past, and the situation hasn't improved vastly. There are still major issues with prison healthcare as far as we can see it.
Katie McAllister, thank you very much indeed. Katie there from Madden and Finucane Solicitors.